do not know the answer to your question.
The Secretary of Homeland Security does not know the answer to the status of 42 individuals who came to our southern border illegally, are on the no-fly list and the terrorist watch list. You do not know whether they have been released or not into the country.
But he lied to an FBI agent. You don't think that's important?
Oh, it's very important. He lied to us before he came clean under the immunity agreement and admitted that he had deleted the emails.
No, not according to the FBI's documents. He had the immunity agreement in December of 2015.
Well, what does a non-politician do in talking about political advantages?
A non-politician is talking about political advantages to try to make himself seem smarter by conjecturing about something he doesn't really know.
So you're a professor at MIT and you're worried about not looking smart enough?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you succeeded, if that was your goal. Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. Most people are interested in the truth. The question is, how do we find it? There's the inquisitorial way with judges or court officials asking questions, seeking evidence, and conducting the investigations. Some countries have inquisitorial systems. Ours is an adversarial system. There is tension, there's examination, there's cross-examination, there are prosecutors and defense attorneys, there are easy questions and hard questions. We chose this system because we believe the conflict, the tension, will bring about the truth. In our system, even victims of crime are cross-examined. Even children testify and are cross-examined. We've always thought highly of cross-examination in confronting witnesses and evidence. We included the right to confront in our Bill of Rights. Why? Because confrontation through cross-examination is the single best way to find the truth. I watched the January 6th congressional hearing Thursday night. 3 allegations caught my attention. Number one, that former President Trump knew he lost the 2016 election but said otherwise. Number two, that former President Trump knew there was no dispositive fraud sufficient to change the outcome. And number three, that former President Trump was sympathetic to the cries to do Mike Pence harm. Those are serious allegations deserving of the truth. The question is, how do we find it? If you were asking the questions last Thursday night, you might want to know, who are the witnesses supporting these allegations? Who said the former president knew he lost? Who said the former president knew there was no significant fraud? Was the witness in a position to know these things? Did the witness have firsthand knowledge? Is the witness credible? Is the witness biased for or against the former president? Were others present? Is there corroboration? Did the witnesses share this information contemporaneous to learning it? If there are witnesses with firsthand knowledge, the former president was ambivalent about whether the vice president should be physically harmed, those witnesses should be heard from immediately. But who are they? And who will examine and cross-examine these witnesses? Those are basic questions you ask to test the reliability of evidence. And yet, this hearing was not adversarial, and you did not hear those questions. Not yet, at least. I listened closely to Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards. In fact, I wrote down questions while she testified. I am pro-law enforcement. That is my bias. I don't want cops injured or abused or left to fight for their own safety against overwhelming odds, which is why I wanted to know. When did you realize you needed backup? Why so few officers assigned to serve alongside you? Where were the supervisors as the mob marched toward the Capitol? What briefings did you receive leading up to January 6th? Did any agencies provide warnings or intelligence? Did the FBI warn you? What about Homeland Security? Were additional officers needed, available? Could the National Guard have helped? The image of a police officer being overrun and injured should offend everyone. We should ask how it happened, why it happened, and why the officers were outnumbered. Did you hear those questions? Cross-examination does not mean yelling or berating a witness. It does mean asking all the relevant questions. Congressional hearings have a host of limitations. That was true when I was there, it's true now, and I suspect it always will be. They make for good television, but they're not always very good at finding the whole truth. What hope you do have would come through the cross-examination of witnesses. And whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or don't care, look for cross-examination. It's the best way to find the truth. And when there is no cross-examination, you may never know whether you got the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Joining us now is Politico Congressional Correspondent Olivia Beavers. Olivia, I want to play a quick clip for you and then ask you a question on the other side.
Once the evidence is accumulated by the Justice Department, it needs to make a decision about whether it can prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt the president's guilt or anyone else's. But they need to be investigated if there's credible evidence, which I think there is.
Olivia, despite your youth, you have seen a lot of congressional investigations. You've seen Republicans and Democrats promise prison and indictments. And I mean, is there a risk that the expectation is going to be set too high? If you're already talking about prison, I mean, can't we just have the second hearing before we talk about that?
That is certainly a huge pitfall, Trey. And I mean, you know, with Jamie Raskin saying this is going to blow your mind, I think the strategy that a lot of people try to actually take is to underplay expectations and then overperform. But we're also very early into these hearings, so I think we just got a little nibble of what they are hoping to present. We saw some of the sort of information that we knew conceptually, which was how violent and dangerous it got, but some of that film was very hard to watch at first. But in these hearings, you know, it's right now, since these are all Pelosi-appointed people, the performance of them falls on Democrats. So if they can't reach the expectations that they set, there's no one else to blame.
Olivia, you raise a great point, which leads to my second question. Is there any buyer's remorse on the Democrat side of not either seating Jimmy Jordan or Banks, or on Kevin's, the Republican side, and not replacing them? Is anybody thinking maybe we should have done something different?
I haven't picked up on any sort of buyer's remorse from Democrats, even if, you know, it gave Republicans the point that it is unfair that they don't have representatives from their party. But, you know, you were touching on it earlier about what, without the other side being there to cross-examine them, the reality is these are all people who are picked by Pelosi, even if there are two Republicans who have turned their, their backs on the Trump world. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding is what we're going to see in the depositions, which have yet to be released, and we don't know when they plan to release them, the documents and other records that they've compiled, and that will be some of the best supporting evidence that we see about the claims that they are making in terms of Donald Trump's involvement in January 6th.
All right, one more question about January 6th. The allegation that got my attention, and I did watch it, was the allegation that the former president was agnostic about the health of Vice President Pence while they were chanting about him. Is there look, you have great sources. I'm not going to ask you your sources because you wouldn't tell me if you did. But is there a sense of whether there will be witnesses who actually make that allegation? That is a very serious allegation.
There's definitely conversations about whether, you know, they're going to have Mark Short come testify. He was Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff. We know that he's been cooperating with the committee, and he's been sharing sort of how he was warning Secret Service to say that the vice president's life was in danger. And I remember in the days after January 6th, I was in the chamber, and I remember calling members to talk to them about it. And the reaction that I got from a lot of House Republicans was, I can't believe what he did to Mike. I can't believe what he did to Mike. So there was actually that belief right after the assault that I heard from Republicans themselves in terms of feeling like Donald Trump turned his back on his vice president.
I want to switch sides of the Capitol with you. Over on the Senate side, there was news breaking today that this bipartisan group had reached some consensus on potential legislation on firearms. What are you hearing about that?
Well, you know, it's you and I have both been on Capitol Hill long enough to I was very skeptical about the two sides being able to come together, and they are halfway there, or, well, we'll see if they're even halfway, but they have agreed to a framework, and the framework is, you know, raising more comprehensive background checks for people who are under 21, closing the boyfriend loophole, more resources for school safety and mental health. And there's 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats who both are on board, but That's just the first hurdle. The second hurdle is whether they can get the legislative text with both sides still agreeing. And you know Democrats will want to go further, and it's about this ebb and flow of how far both sides are willing to come together, and who will push. Will someone push too far, or will they be able to push it forward?
And you know, Olivia, it's been it's been a minute or two since I studied civics, but I'm almost positive, even if it passes the Senate, it still has to go to the House, and that's a different animal over there. But I know you'll be following it, and I can't wait for you to come back on Sunday night and explain to us what all is happening. Thank you for joining us, Olivia. You take care.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.